Good morning, Florida Club Mountain Association. This is Tommy Spalding, and welcome to our Heart-Led Leader webinar series. We've been doing these series for almost 3 years now, and I'm so excited about this morning's guest. I was so excited. I shaved for the first time in 3 years, and I got on the treadmill working out, and I heard the story in the Wall Street Journal this morning that Kmart used to have 2,323 stores nationally, and they announced more closings today, and as of tomorrow, there'll only be 3 stores left. So go over 2,000 stores, and now years later, three stores left. Amazon, Walmart, Target all ate their lunch. And someone's gonna eat our lunch one day unless we innovate, unless we change and we grow. And no one innovates and changes and grows more than my friend, John French, as we know, JJ French. I was trying to think about a great way to introduce John to you, and here's how I'm gonna introduce him. We couldn't be more different, John and I. John used to be a successful drug dealer in New York City. I've never tried drugs. He plays guitar. He's one of the greatest guitar players of all times. He's done 9,200 shows. I quit the guitar in 6th grade. John's an atheist. I'm a devout Christian. I'm a conservative. John is not. John has had 80,000 screaming fans throw personal articles of clothing on the stage, and this never happened to me. But what I love about John French is that he's one of the smartest human beings I've ever met. And we met on tour. We both did a gig together, and I just fell in love with how smart he is and the most incredible storyteller. He lives right on Central Park in New York City. So every time I'm in New York City for the past 15 years, I call up John. And for dozens and dozens of times, we've walked around Central Park. No one knows the history of Central Park in New York City more than John French. And it's just a beautiful, smart human being. I've learned from John, don't judge a book by its cover. I learned from John that reinventing yourself and innovation is everything for success. And I've learned from John that everyone can learn something from everybody. When I first told Beth Sargent, my partner in crime, that we we're going to have JJ French, one of the greatest, rock stars of all time, a founding member of Twisted Sister, be on this webinar series. She said to me, "How many times is he going to say the F word?" I said, "Only about 100 times, but it's going to be really good." John French founded Twisted Sister. He's the founding member 50 years ago next year, in 1973. They've had 10 albums, over 30 million records sold, 9,200 shows. John has personally had 38 golden platinum albums that he's produced or performed on. But what makes John's stories amazing, we remember Twisted Sister. He's going to tell the whole story, but his innovation after the songs, We're Not Going to Take It, I Want to Rock, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, have produced millions and millions of dollars of revenue in licenses. Tide, T-Mobile, KFC, Walmart, Avis, and we all remember the famous Facebook ad on Super Bowl ad, We're Not Going to Take It, in 2020. John has now owned the proprietary rights to these licenses and is full-on business with Twisted Business. Ladies and gentlemen of the Florida Club Mountain Association, we're in for a real treat. One of my favorite rock stars of all time, JJ French.
Tommy, thank you so much for thinking of me. I mean, we met through Steve Farber, and my God, it's been a great relationship. And yes, we do walk Central Park all the time, and it's a great walk, isn't it? And it's a fast one too, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a fast one. I'm telling you, it's great. But thank you so much, Tommy. Tommy, by the way, you talk about being very different people. We're different, but we're not. Because we're both very hardworking guys, and we're both dedicated to what we do. And we're both dedicated to our families. At the end of the day, that really winds up being, I think, the foundation of our relationship, because we're both very business oriented. We both take this seriously. So really, thank you for having me.
You're free to start.
John, I think in everyone's mind, just tell us the tell us the whole story about Twisted Sister, how it began, the evolution, and where it is today.
Okay, to make this kind of quick, so my book is called Twisted Business, and there's covers on it in the back there, and it tells the whole story, and there's a documentary out as well. I'm going to keep the F words to an absolute minimum, but I will tell you that when Tommy mentioned about my drug use, I want to clarify this because there's reasons about why it happened and then my response to it. And that was when I was 15, between the ages of 15 and 20, I was a heavy drug user, I was a drug addict, and I was a drug dealer. My parents didn't have money. I needed money to buy guitars, and I started dealing drugs. I got in that whole world of drug dealing. And then what happened in 1972, 5 years into this, when I was 20, heroin hit the scene, and it wiped out everything. It wiped out my friends, my girlfriends. They all became junkies. I OD'd on heroin. It came really, really bad, and I had to make a decision. It was either walk away from this scene or die or get killed. And I picked a day. It's in the book, Easter Sunday, 1972. I stopped everything, and that was the end of it. And that was, like 50 years ago. So that was it. Now I stopped doing it completely on a dime. Easter Sunday, 1972 was the last time I did it. I walked away from it. And of course, I'm 20 years old. And what do? I want to join a band. So I say to my mom, Mom, here's the good news and the bad news. The good news is I'm no longer doing drugs. I'm out of the business completely, but I'm going to be a transvestite rock and roll musician, to which she was horrified and didn't know which was worse. But the original Twisted Sister was a transvestite rock band, and we started in 1970. Officially, the official date is Valentine's Day, 1973. Now, if you look at bands that came out in 1973, Tommy, some of the big bands: Kiss, 73, Aerosmith, 73, Judas Priest, 73, AC/DC, 73, Twisted Sister, 73. Look at all those bands. It's incredible. If you would have asked any one of us back in 1973, how long would we last as a band? Our answer would have been 5 years. That was the standard answer. 5 years, 6 years, maybe. Here we are 50 years later. 50 years later, Kiss, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Judas Priest. What's the difference between them and Twisted Sister? As good as all those bands are, and they're great bands, they are classic bands, they're legendary bands, they're some of my favorite bands. You ask a 10-year-old kid to sing a Kiss song, not going to necessarily know it. Ask him to sing an AC/DC song, he's probably not going to know it. Ask him to do a Priest song, he's probably not going to know it. Ask him to sing an Aerosmith song, he's not going to know it. You ask him to sing, we're not going to take it. And that kid will sing, we're not going to take it. And the reason why that kid will sing, we're not going to take it, is because over the years, Twisted Sister learned to survive by changing its business model. And we are now the most licensed heavy metal band in history, and our songs are used more than any other band's songs, which is why these songs, I Want to Rock and We're Not Going to Take It. So the story of the band as it evolves is that the band went through alcoholics and drug addicts, and because I was straight, I was horrified by this, and I kept firing guys until we had a straight band. And Dee Snider came in. He was the fourth lead singer. Believe it or not, you all think he was the first or the second, or no, he's the fourth. When I hired Dee, the first thing I said was, do you drink or do drugs? He said, absolutely not. I said, you're my guy. And that's really it, because he was totally straight. We hired Mark Mendoza on bass. I said, do you drink or do drugs? He said, absolutely not. I said, you're my guy. When you have a band that's straight and it's bulletproof, then you can work like we did. So if you look at our book and you go in the back of the book, I've got all the shows we played listed. We worked 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week, 5 shows a night. How does that compute in the business world? Well, you're 20 years old, you're playing in a band, and I'll show you, I'll explain to you how this works. You ask a young band today how many shows they've played, and if they've around 2 years or so, they'll say, oh, we played like 50 shows, 60 shows. Well, in the first 30 months of Twisted Sister's career, from March 1973 until Labor Day weekend 1975, 30 months. In just those 30 months, we played 3,450 performances. And that's how you get good. You become bulletproof because you do it over and over again. And I talk about this in my book. I call it the boredom of excellence. In order to become great at anything, you got to do it a million times. And that's really the case. I mean, if you think about gold medal winners in the Olympics, why do they win the gold medal? Because they're up at like 4 o'clock in the morning doing what they're doing, and they're doing it 5 or 6 days a week for 10 or 15 years. And that's how they get good. And if you look at their first chair at the Philharmonic and, and violin player, and you go, how'd you get good? Well, my mom made me get up at 6 a.m. and do it 10 hours a day for, 10 years. That's how you get good. Well, that's how you do it. You do it. And most people don't do it. Most people can't do it. Most people don't want to do it. I don't blame them. It's a hell of a grind to do this, but through constant performance technique, we learned how to be great. And then over the years, as we went through version after version after version after version, the 14th version is the band that actually made it. That's the band that you all know in the videos. The 14th version of Twisted Sister. I'm the only original guy standing. We fired band members, drug use, alcoholism, just they couldn't keep up with the ridiculous work schedule. That's how you make it. So when people ask about the story of Twisted Sister, the book is based upon my twisted method of reinvention, TWISTED, twisted method of reinvention, TWISTED, tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. That's twisted. Most people do not have a clue as to why a rock band makes it other than sex, drugs, rock and roll, and fairy dust. They made some deal with somebody and they became fans. I can't speak for Motley Crue, and I can't speak for the Rolling Stones. I can't speak for any of those people. I can only speak for Twisted. Twisted Sister worked its butt off, and we were straight. And being straight meant that we couldn't tell that to people because it would destroy our relationship. Think about the crazy irony of what I just said. Think about this. You're a politician, and you're caught in a hotel room with cocaine and an underage girl or boy, whatever, and you're done. You're out of a gig. And you're an athlete, famous athlete, you're found with drugs and underage person in the hotel, you're done. In my business, they give you a Grammy for that. they name a building after you. Hey man, I want to be that. So stunted emotional development is kind of like the cornerstone of my business. And we didn't tolerate it. We just worked really hard. Look, if you're going to do the math quickly, I was 20 when I started the band. The band's celebrating its 50th anniversary. Guess what? I'm 70. And I've run marathons, and I wouldn't be like this if I didn't run a really strong, straight business. So in a nutshell, that is it. Now, in the process of all this, as I explained in the book, we were turned down more times in a bedsheet in a whorehouse and have come back more times than Freddy Krueger. And it's the coming back after rejection over and over and over and over and over again, because we are in the entertainment business. That's also what we specialize in. And when I do my motivational speaking, I explain in detail how that happened and how we dealt with it and how we survived it. I don't just make a statement and just walk away. I give you tools to explain how to overcome this stuff, because rejection is really the toughest thing in the world. And you have to, as an entrepreneur, learn how to deal with it. And after all, what do entrepreneurs do? I mean, entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs essentially because they either want to bring to the world a product that the world has never seen before, or they want to bring an improved product to the world that deserves to be improved upon. And they're willing to sacrifice everything in order to achieve those goals. And I was built to do that.
John, do you mind sharing the story that I wrote about you and the Heart-Led Leader? About after the rise of Twisted Sister, there was a time where record sales stopped and you stopped touring and you reinvented yourself and you were installing audio equipment. And that story of humility is probably one of my favorite stories. We can share that.
Okay. So in 1984, The World Knows We're Not Going to Take It, I Want to Rock, all the videos happened. And we'd already been together 12 years. I'd been at it for 12 years. And at that point, when people said, oh man, isn't this great? You know, you're selling all these records and you're everywhere in the world and you're one of the top bands in the world. Isn't this great? And I'm like, no, man, I'm just tired. I just want to play and go home and, you know, take my money and just kind of rest. I'm just tired. And I really was tired. But we went through like a 5-year period of worldwide fame. We released Come Out and Play, which is the follow-up album, and it didn't do as well. In fact, it didn't really do that well. And the band had partnered with a merchandise company that gave us one of the biggest merchandise deals in the history of the music business. In fact, Springsteen, Madonna, and Twisted Sister got the first $1 million advances in the history of the music business for merchandise. Well, Madonna went on, had a huge tour. Springsteen went on, did a huge tour. We didn't. Our tour folded about halfway through, and we owe all this money. We signed a personal services contract, which, you know, in hindsight, I can always say in hindsight, that wasn't a smart thing, but we also never lost a bet. I mean, the band always came up a winner. So I didn't think it was going to be risky. But the fissures, the problems in the band started to show. The personnel issues, the crises between D and the band members and me and D became untenable. And we decided to stop after 15 years. And immediately the merchandise company decided that they wanted their money back. And they looked at the guys in the band and figured, well, they're not going to amount to much, maybe, but we know that D and JJ will. So they came after us and we filed for personal bankruptcy. So we filed for personal bankruptcy. And I have to tell you, linked with this, if you read the book, Twisted Business, there was an episode when I was 22 years old in which the first version of the band broke up because the lead singer, the original lead singer, pulled a gun out, loaded gun out in the drummer in a bar fight, threatened to kill him. That week, I walked into that scene with the gun pointing at the guy's chest and thought, oh my God, I'm about to witness a murder. I really thought so. Everybody was drunk, so who knew what was going to happen? That week also, my girlfriend broke up with me, and that girl was the love of my life at that time. And my mother died, all within about a 10-day period of time. I went into a crushing depression and stopped eating and sleeping for about 9 months, lost a ton of weight. And I should have gone to a therapist, which I didn't, which was an important lesson to know for the future. However, I started keeping a diary of my emotional state because I wanted to kill myself. I was so distraught, so depressed. Those diaries that started on the day of my mother's funeral, I wrote for 15 years. So rule one, keeping a diary is really important, because if you keep diaries, not only do you keep your development in perspective, but it gives you validation. If you overcome your obstacles and you're moving forward, that you can overcome every obstacle. Now, I didn't go to a therapist. 9 months after this occurred, I came out of my depression. I woke up one morning, I wasn't in pain. I kind of thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. I'm not in pain. It's got to be a mistake. I know I'll wake up in emotional pain tomorrow. And I didn't. And I realized in my case, I healed. Okay. And I was lucky because I was so depressed, and I don't take that for granted. And when people tell me about depression, it's a big thing and it's serious. And I was in a black hole. But the point was that I overcame this particular horrible situation when I was 22. So here I am confronted with my bankruptcy in 1989. And 6 months before I filed for my bankruptcy, which, by the way, led to, because the band broke up, I was running a pool hall overnight. Before I was even selling stereos, I was running a pool hall for a friend of mine because I needed money. And 6 months before I filed for bankruptcy, I was in England visiting the parents of my soon-to-be second wife, and I'm watching a television show, and in that TV show, there was a commercial, and the commercial had there was a Tide detergent commercial. For some reason, the song Stand By Me by Benny King, the 1961 song, was the bed for the commercial. And that song, because England is such a peculiar country and their pop world is so weird, the song was re-released by the record label because of the commercial and went back up to #1. And I'm watching the commercial going, I don't know what this has to do with detergent, but wow, music in commercials, what a great idea, you know. So, sorry about that. Anyway, so here I am in bankruptcy court, and the judge looks at me and he goes, "How are you bankrupt, Mr. French? Twisted Sister, super famous." I said, "That doesn't matter. Twisted Sister, super famous." I said, "Some of the biggest things in the world go bankrupt because just things happen." And I said, "You know, you can spend $100 million on a movie, get the best actor and director, and it can go south, and you know, the movie bombs, and you can spend $30 million on a Broadway show, and you know, best book, best director, best actor, I said, can bomb." I said, "In our case, we rolled the dice and it came up empty, and we're being sued, and so I have to file for bankruptcy." And he said, "Well, why shouldn't I take the name from you? Because I own the name Twisted Sister. I bought out the original members." And he said, "You could, but it's worthless." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We're yesterday's news. Nobody cares about Twisted Sister." And it's true. We were dead. We were over. I said, "But if you let me keep the name, who knows, in 10 years, maybe Tide detergent will license the song. And if they do, maybe I can convince the guys to get back together again. And if I do that, maybe I'll remarry and have a kid. And if I do that, maybe I'll need money to send the kid to college. And if I do that, and we have our music and commercials, I'll make enough money to send my kid to a college." And the judge looked at me and went, "Oh, that's a rather cogent argument, Mr. French. Okay, I'll let you keep the name." Okay, so 10 years to the month of that proclamation in court at Bowling Green in New York, 10 years to the month. Comtrex nasal spray license, we're not going to take it for the first license for a product ever. And now we're the most licensed. So that was kind of an amazing situation. However, in the 10 years that after I filed for bankruptcy, I worked in a pool hall. I sold stereo equipment. My wife was a highly paid music executive, so we weren't short for money, but my pride was hurt, and I was selling stereos, and I'd go to people's houses, and I'd see my records in their houses, and I would never tell them who I was. I didn't, I didn't do that because I didn't want to wallow in my own self-pity. But I wondered how that was going to come, how that was going to pull itself out, and it did pull itself out through a band called Seven Dust. Some of you may have heard of them. I knew those guys for years and years and years, and there were other names of other bands, and they asked me to be involved with them. And I agreed to manage and produce an album, which turned out to be almost platinum. I never produced an album before. So me and my bass player, Mark, produced the record, and then I managed them. And what happened was they became so successful. I became so successful with them. It pulled me out of any financial issues I had. And then 9/11 occurred. And for those of you who don't know, you all know 9/11. But for those of you who don't know, what happened was there was a big benefit at Madison Square Garden with The Who and Springsteen and all this. They didn't want heavy metal bands. They thought heavy metal bands were too aggressive. So we did our own benefit. Us, Ace Frehley, Overkill, Sebastian Bach, and Twisted Sister. We raised $100,000 for the Widows and Orphans Fund for the New York City Police Fire Department and Special Services Unit. When the word got out that the band reformed, because we had played together in 12 years, the word got out in Europe that the band reformed. And all of a sudden offers started coming in, like crazy offers. We had no idea how successful the band was. We really didn't know the legacy. I know that may be hard to believe, but you don't really know what you mean to people until you're not there. And then they hear that you could come back, and all of a sudden the offers started really rolling in. From 2003, we decided to reunite for 2 years. And then 2 years later, the offers got bigger. And then 2 years later, the offers got bigger. And 2 years later, the offers got bigger. And it went on and on and on and on. And finally, 2015 comes, and we're saying to ourselves, wow, is this ever going to end? This is unbelievable. This is incredible. And our drummer dies of a heart attack, AJ Pirro. And AJ was so important to the band. He was like what John Bonham was to Zeppelin, Keith Moon was to The Who. Very, very important. I didn't want to continue beyond it. 2016 would have been the 40th anniversary of me, Dee, and Eddie playing together. So we decided to do a farewell tour in 2016. We called it was 40th anniversary. We called it the 40 and Fuck It tour. And we played to, I don't know, anywhere from 60 to 110,000 people a night during that run, basically through Europe. And we called it a day. However, we already had transformed the business into a licensing business. So the money made in live was great, but it didn't sustain us. So let's look at this for a second here. When we ended in 2016, we made a conscious decision to walk away because we already set up another business. And because of my evolution in the business, firing guys, bringing the right people in, making the moves that I had to make in order to guarantee a future, because everything was so transitional over this period of time, over that 40, 50-year period, we were already set up. So when COVID hit 2019 and wiped out everything, every band we knew was in trouble. We just sat back and went, okay, well, we're doing licensing. And of course, what happens during the COVID, licensing gets even bigger. So we kind of we dodged that bullet because we transformed and changed over. People do not think that bands do that. The bands that succeed, or the entertainers that succeed, do that all the time. Think about the favorite artists you like. Well, they survived because they changed, because they altered their business model, whether they want to admit it or not, whether they want to call it a change in a business model, whether they want to apply business techniques to it, they do, whether they do it themselves or through management. That's what they do. This is how you survive. Dee Snider is one of the most creative people in the world, besides being a phenomenal singer. And Dee always works. He's always trying to do things. He's constantly self-motivated. And this is what entrepreneurs do. And this is how we kind of survive. So that's how I pulled out of that horrific bankruptcy, Tommy, and went on to have a career.
Yeah, and I just love that story, John, because everyone in life goes through tough times and they rise and fall in their careers and lose jobs and reinvent themselves. And I love the fact that you're one of the hottest, rock and roll bands of all time. And then basically you were installing high-end stereo systems, and it must have been very humbling when you're in someone's living room and seeing Twisted Sister albums and you're installing systems, but
Tommy, not only is it humbling, but when you do that in New York City on the East Side, you have to go through the worker entrance in the back of the building. So here's my friends. I couldn't even walk to the front door of buildings on Park Avenue. They go, "Excuse me, you're a worker."
Yeah.
And I'm not going, but I'm so-and-so from so-and-so, and I'm not doing that. So I'm going through the back door of apartment buildings. It was tough, man. It was tough.
Yeah, and we have hundreds of club leaders that run country clubs all throughout Florida. They're leaders, they're managers, and they're managing people. They're dealing with clients and customers and members. You mentioned that you wrote this book, Twisted Business, and twisted has a meaning. I'd love you to spend the remaining time really kind of talking about what's TWISTED, and how do you bring that back to our everyday lives to be better leaders in the club business and our personal lives?
Thank you for asking me, Tom. So here it is. So about 6-7 years ago, our friend Steve Farber, who basically has been pushing me to do this book, and basically Steve is a mentor, and you've been a mentor to me. He said, we got to do a book. And I'm thinking, how am I going to approach the book? How am I going to approach the book? And I'm watching some interview with a woman who wrote a book called Grit, Angela Duckworth, I think that was it. And she said, "Oh, grit is the reason why anyone succeeds. Grit's the one element. Grit is the element." I'm thinking, and I'm watching her, and I'm going, "Really? It's grit? That's grit, is it? I don't know if it's just grit. It could be a lot of things." So I start writing down all the words that I thought applied to Twisted Sister. I said, "Well, excellence. We were disciplined. We were stable as a business, all these words." And I put them all on paper, a lot of words. And then I started to look at the letters and the words, and it showed up like TWISTED, tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. And I said, you know what? I can write a book based on this because I can apply every one of these letters. So let's look at these letters individually. People say, what's the most important letter? Well, T for tenacity. If you don't have tenacity, you got nothing. I mean, you really have nothing. Tenacity is the foundation of all of it. If you are not able to turn yourself around, then you can't survive. And you have to be able to pick yourself up. And you have to understand what it's like to be rejected and to pick yourself up over and over and over again. There's all these cliches. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. And it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. I've got my other cliches. One was written by a songwriter friend of mine, which is one of my favorite lines is, "When the roof caves in, it lets the sunshine in." Wow, what a line that is. And it's true. You almost can't tell because it's so horrible when the roof caves in, but it does let the sunshine in if you allow that sunshine to come in and see it. The second one is, I don't remember the exact quote from boxer Joe Louis, but he made a statement, something like, when you get knocked down in the ring, you can't get back up so fast that nobody knows you got knocked down. So they do give you the 10 count, take the 10 count, and so I started thinking about taking the 10 count. And I thought to myself, wow, when you're taking a hit, you go through an evolution of how you're interpreting that crushing defeat. And I realized we followed a pattern of tenacity that went like this. First we mourned the rejection, then we reflected on the rejection. Like, why did we get turned down? Because just because someone says you suck doesn't mean you don't suck. You could really suck. You have to really be honest with yourself. And then what we did was we retooled and we reapplied. We did this over and over and over again. We mourned the rejection, we reflected on the rejection, we retooled, meaning we went back into the studio, wrote more songs, or thought about the stage show and revised it. And then we reapplied these new rules and we moved forward, and we did it again, and we did it again, and we did it again. So that's tenacity, and that's the T, and that's the most important. Wisdom is this kind of nebulous phrase, but every great company has someone who has wisdom, someone has the ability to see a larger picture. Keith Richards was asked, what's the difference between him and Mick Jagger? It's kind of a funny response. And he says, well, Mick wakes up every morning and thinks, what's happening today, 10 days from now, 10 years from now, 10 weeks from now, 10 months from now, 10 years from now. Keith goes, I got up and just said, I got up this morning, Well, every business needs one of those kinds of visionaries. And I have that capability. I'm always seeing down the road. Inherently, wisdom is inherent. And I didn't know I had wisdom until a particular conversation that I had with my dad when my mom died and I was 22 years old. And if you were to ask any of my teachers, they'd say that, you know, I talked too much. I didn't concentrate in schools. I was a terrible student. I dropped out of high school, in fact, 2 months before my graduation as a political statement. And it's a very long story. Again, that is in the book. But what happened was my father and I didn't have a great relationship. And my mom died. And I realized my mom was the cartilage between me and my dad. And we're sitting in the living room and I'm looking at my father. He's a traveling salesman. So he came in for the service. He's going to go back on the road again. I'm thinking to myself, do I even have a relationship with this guy? I'm 22. He's, you know, he's 68, 69 at the time. And we're sitting there and I said, so what are we going to do together? Are we going to have a relationship or not? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. I'll make a grand bargain. He goes, what is it? I said, if you can forgive me for being the high school dropout, the drug dealer, all the things that I screwed up that you think I was a failure at, and all the disappointments that I brought you and all this stuff. And I overlooked the fact that you used to hit me, whip me with a belt at times. And made me want to hate you. If I will let that go and you will let it go and we shake hands and we say from here on out, we're just going to like have, I'm sorry, I live in New York City. And so you're hearing horns in the background. But if we can just shake hands and say, you know what, from here on out, let's just start fresh and not be judgmental anymore. And he said, you got a deal. We shook hands. And guess what? I had a great 10 years of my day. He wasn't going to go to therapy. He's old school. It wasn't going to happen. So I had to make a choice. Either put it all behind me and move forward or just sit there and let it ruminate for the rest of my life. And that's wisdom. And you know, we had a great 10 years. I mean, we'd talk all the time. What's going on? How's things on the road? How's the band doing? He came to see a bunch of shows. We had a great, great time. And that's the best I could get out of it. That, my friend, is wisdom. And if you possess it or someone in your company possesses it, then that is an ingredient you absolutely need. The I in Twisted stands for inspiration. Now, this is important because every entrepreneur has nothing in the early days except inspiration. That's the fuel that feeds you. You don't have money, but you're inspired. What are you inspired for? You ask anybody, a skier, an actor, they go, why do you do this? Because when I was 10, I saw this person on TV and oh my God. Or you ask an actress, oh, when I was 8, my mom took me to see Annie on Broadway and I said, that's what I want to do. You know, for me, I saw the Beatles on TV. That's what I wanted to do. That's usually the difference between artists and people who are successful just on the pure business side who learn it like in college and come to their inspiration later in life, you know, maybe during college or business school or a little afterwards. Most creative people get it really early on. And like I said, inspiration is the fuel that feeds you when you don't have money. And hopefully the inspiration pushes you until you start making enough money that eventually the scale turns and you can survive because of your desire to want to continue to a certain level of economic stability. But the point is that without inspiration, you don't have anything. So inspiration is, again, that is what inspired us. Inspiration inspired every one of my members of my band. My guitar player, Eddie, plays guitar the way he does because he was inspired by Clapton. My bass player plays the bass that he does because he's inspired by Jack Bruce. Dee Snider was inspired by Robert Plant. I mean, this is what happens. And that's why the I cannot be overlooked under any circumstances. The S for stability is important because here's where the business of the band versus what you may think a band does comes into play. Stability, the S for stability. Well, early on, when the band was playing in the bars, I was confronted with the reality of some of the band members needed to make a certain amount of money to survive, which meant they needed a job or they could be paid enough in the band. So I determined the base salary for the band and said, if we can make X and you can guarantee X a week, can you devote 100% to this band? Yes or no? Yes. So I said, okay, I'm going to create a business model in which we can make X a week to cover the salaries for everybody. And I knew it. And we did. And that was the beginning of understanding the stability in a business. You have to have someone who can create stability. And, you know, businesses are like planes, you know, and there's turbulence and then there's real turbulence, you know, and there's real turbulence. And I kind of say to myself, you know, a company, A life runs on challenges, crises, and catastrophes. You know, there's a challenge is like the day-to-day small stuff, and a crisis is bigger than it. You want to do everything to avoid the catastrophe. You want to try to keep the plane as stable as possible. So the idea was to keep a business model that was as stable as possible. So even when the band was being rejected by the record labels, we were always making enough money playing bars that everybody could sustain their lifestyle while we were pursuing our goal. So creating stability where the band could count on the fact that as a company, we were always able to give you an environment that you could create in and not have to feel the pressures from outside, that became important. So that's what the S of stability was. And it turned out to be one of the most important letters the whole run. So that's really the key. So we have TWIS, we have tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust. Well, trust is really important. Trust in the people who are running your business, trust in the people who you devote yourself to. When you have a company, not everybody's a chief, of course. You have mostly Indians and you have a couple of chiefs. Well, do you trust those chiefs? Do you? These are the people who are making the financial decisions, the creative decisions to run your life. And if you happen to have the talent that they need, you don't have to have those properties, but you need people with those properties in order for the companies to succeed. And so you have to trust the people who you're focused with. So in a Twisted Sister, we all trusted Dee to write the material, and they trusted me to create a business environment. So trust becomes really an important part of a successful business. And that's why the second T comes in for trust. Again, I go into it in the book and I give you big examples of how that fits in. The E and the D, excellence and discipline. Well, this is really interesting because when I was writing for Inc. magazine, I wrote an article called The Poet of Excellence. And I alluded to that earlier on when I was talking about the fact that you have to do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. You know, there's a cliche that says insanity is when you do the same thing over again, expect different results, you know. And I don't believe in that at all. Not at all, especially in a business like ours, because constantly repeating changes your chemical makeup in your brain. And you start solving problems and it's so incremental and it is so slow that you don't even realize it's happened. But your brain starts to change as you start to learn to adapt and you start to not make the mistake you made yesterday. You may make new ones, but you didn't make the old ones because you dealt with the old ones, you figured out the old ones, and you're moving on to the next one. Well, after 9,000 shows, you know what? You solved every little slide. I mean, there's nothing left. You're a bulletproof band. Well, you do something a million times. You know, that the 10,000 hour thing, it's interesting because I actually added up because I actually kept a diary of all the dates, all the rehearsals and all that going back to 73. And I actually figured out that prior to our record deal, which we signed to Atlantic in 1983, prior to that record deal, we spent 9,800 hours in performance or rehearsal for the 10 years. 9,800 hours. Well, there you go. If you still suck after 10,000 hours, maybe you're in the wrong business. But that's why the band became so good live and so bulletproof. So that is basically, that's what excellence is about. And discipline, the last letter, the D for discipline is really important because if you're not disciplined, you have nothing. And the band was unbelievably disciplined. We did everything by the book, and we learned to deal with contracts. If a contract says you're on stage at 9 o'clock, you're on stage at 9 o'clock. You don't mess around. When I go see shows, a band show up 45 minutes late, an hour late, I really get annoyed. Why do you take advantage of the audience like that? Why do you treat them on such crap? We had ultimate respect for our audience, but the discipline that we had was also to be great every night. Not like, oh, I got so wasted last night, and I don't know how I got through that night. I can't imagine. Well, that's because we didn't. We were so disciplined that we played at a 10 out of 10 every night. And my singer, D, from the day he got his first vocal warm-up tape, which was in 1976, he spends 2 hours in the dressing room every day, every show, for thousands of shows that I've been with him, doing his vocal exercises so he can be perfect every time. And that's the discipline of excellence. So all of that comes into play. If you want to be successful, you have to have all those things. You have to be tenacious, you have to have wisdom, you have to be inspired, you have to have a stable business. You have to trust the people who are guiding you. You have to have excellence in terms of your goal, and you have to be disciplined in order to achieve that excellence.
John, I love that. And I took so much from that. I think the members did as well in the call about, if you want to be great in something, do it for 10,000 hours. I mean, I remember when I first got on stage to speak in high school, I was stuttering and scared of the spotlight and, couldn't remember my lines, right? And you just do it 10,000 times and you get better and better at it. And I just suggest that anyone that's on this call, that if you want to be a great GM or a leader or golf professional. You just keep doing it every day. And I think that's heart-led leadership. If you want to be a great heart-led leader, you got to work on humility. You got to work on vulnerability, transparency, love, honesty every day, and just work on those characters. I know that we have a few minutes left, and I just want to ask some just crazy fan questions, because I know there's probably some people that are just loving to know the story behind the story. Why dress up as women? Like back in 1972, when you're thinking about Twisted Sister, first of all, how did you come up with the name Twisted Sister? Why transvestites? I love the fact that you're all sober, that you didn't do any drugs. You all kind of got.
That band did. That band did.
Yeah.
Let's be, and I didn't, but I joined a band of alcoholics. Let's put that out there. But Tommy, the times, these were the times. Bowie was number one. T-Rex, Bowie, Slade, everybody was in the makeup and androgyny. So it was the New York Dolls, Alice Cooper. That was the genre of band that we came out of. So the whole thing was, it was a gimmick. Okay? Again, if you're asking me when I was 20 years old, how long would this gimmick last? I didn't know, but it was a gimmick. So when I was joining the band, I said, how are we all going to dress? I said, we're like chicks, we're going to look like girls. And I said, really? I said, are you, any of you guys gay? He goes, no, we're not gay. In fact, that's how you get chicks, man. You look like girls. Like girls love guys that look like girls. Well, I'm like, okay, I'm all in. Yeah, I don't care. However, the name came up because the original band's name was Silver Star, which is an awful, awful name. One quaalude and you'll forget it. And we were having arguments in the rehearsal room. And again, the original lineup is none of the guys that you know of, because if you get the book, you'll see it's completely different people. And we were having arguments at the name of the band. And the lead singer, Michael, went out to a bar after rehearsal and had some drinks, whatever. And he thought of the name Twisted Sister, which I talk about in the book. And he called the house and he goes, hey man, I got a great name. And I picked up the phone. I said, what is it? He said, Twisted Sister. I said, wow, that is a great name. That evokes so much. And when he came back from the bar, I said, Michael, that was a great name. He goes, what name? I said, Twisted Sister, you called the house. He goes, I don't remember. But sadly, he didn't remember. And sadly, Michael's drinking got the better of him. And he was eventually, years way after we fired him, got hit by a car, had brain damage. And even though he looked fine, he didn't remember anything. So when we did our documentary, we are Twisted Fucking Sister, which is the name of the documentary, which you can access online, which I suggest you watch if you really like what I have to say. It goes into depth as well as my book does. Michael didn't remember anything of his world in Twisted, so I couldn't even interview him for our documentary, sadly. That's how the name came about. And that was how the image happened. But within 2 years, the image changed. Michael left. We got another lead singer who was in a Rod Stewart. So we changed our image to like Rod Stewart-ish looking thing. And then he left and I took over lead singing, and I'm like Lou Reed. So we changed into like Velvet Underground kind of look. Then that ended and we got Dee in. And when Dee came in, Rocky Horror Picture Show hit. So we switched over to like more shock rock, not transvestite rock. So again, we talk about transition and you talk about evolution and changing. We kept changing over and over and over and over and over again. Ultimately, the last 10 years of the band's existence, we wore no makeup. We just went on stage in stage clothes. We stopped. And that's a funny story too, how that happened. You have a minute? I can tell you why that happened. But that's actually a really funny story. We're on our way to play a gigantic festival in Europe with Kiss. Imagine this, Tommy, in one afternoon. REO Speedwagon, Kansas, Whitesnake, Def Leppard, Journey, Kiss, and Twisted Sister all playing on the same bill in one afternoon in a show in Holland. And so Dee, is going to take the last plane out of New York to fly to Amsterdam and then take a car ride to this festival, and gets to the airport 7 o'clock in the evening, so he can arrive at 7 o'clock in the morning and drive 2 hours to get to this festival on the other side of Holland. Unfortunately, Dee takes an Ambien on the plane, wakes up 7 hours later, says to the guy next to him, whoa, that was a great flight, didn't even feel it. And the guy said, you didn't feel it because we didn't go anywhere. We've been on hold on the tarmac. So Dee finally gets to Amsterdam, and he gets to Amsterdam 2 hours before the show, and there's no way he can make the show. And this was a big show for us because we're on the bill with Kiss, so we couldn't wait to get all dressed up. And the only way we could get Dee to the show was to fly him in by helicopter. And in Holland, when you rent a helicopter, you rent the helicopter. There's only one. and it landed behind the stage at 5 minutes to 4. And we were all sitting around thinking he wasn't going to make it. So we were wearing t-shirts and jeans. And he comes out of the helicopter with no stage clothes. He's just wearing his t-shirts and jeans. And we go on stage with t-shirts and jeans in front of about 70,000 people. And we do our show. And the next day in the national press, they did a review of the concert. It was called the Arrow Festival. Gigantic double page insert in the national paper. And there's only one photo. And the photo is a Twisted Sister. That's it. Not Kiss, not Def Leppard, not Journey, not Whitesnake, not Motorhead, not or nothing, just us. And it said, the Arrow Festival is a complete success. All the bands are great. The only band that provided a quasi-religious experience was Twisted Sister. And then we said, what are we doing? And that was the end of that. So we changed yet again and stopped wearing all.
Yeah. John, I know that what Twisted D means dedication. What's the E stand for again?
Excellent.
Excellent. Excellent.
Which, as Tommy, as you know, companies that are great have achieved excellence. And that's what you do. So again, tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. These were the rules by which Twisted Sister made it.
Yeah. If you had the one thing, John, you have all these club leaders that are listening to every word you said, you know, for someone that did 9,200 shows, one of the greatest guitar players, rock and roll people of all time, what's like the one thing you want to pass on these young leaders that are rising stars in their career that want to become managers in the club business, that are working 70, 80, 90 hours a week, that are doing things 10,000 times to be excellent? What's the one piece of advice that you want to give them?
You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you talk. Pay attention to what people say. If you run roughshod over on Tommy by not paying attention, you're going to get yourself shot. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot. You have to pay attention. I had an agent who was one of the smartest negotiators I ever met in my life. And he hardly spoke. I mean, you know, there's 2 kinds of guys: the fast talking guy, blah, 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 who rolls over you, you know. This guy just sat back and watched people bury themselves over and over and over again by talking themselves in and out of stuff. The agent would just sit there. And I said to him once, how do you do what you do? He said, just shut up and listen. Pay attention. He said, you will win, because people will bury themselves in their own stupidity or their own ignorance, or they will teach you something that you didn't know. But if you're so full of yourself that you think that you can't learn, you're going to do damage to yourself. So pay attention.
Yeah, I love that, John. And that's just really a testament to our friendship, because, you know, I think a lot of people might have stereotypes of rock and roll stars, you know, especially, you know, Twisted Sister. And I would never think in a million years that a dear, dear friend of mine is the founding member of that. I've learned so much from you over the years. And every time I walk Central Park with you, I just get, you know, so much knowledge in there. One of the things that made me fall in love with you and your heart is when you talk about your daughter and her eye disease. Do you mind just kind of telling that little story about your daughter and what she's gone through?
Well, you know, I have a podcast, and my podcast is called the JJ French Connection Beyond the Music, and it's on Spotify. It's JayJayFrench, JJ French Connection. And on this, I have authors, musicians, actors, but I have doctors on, because I have directly connected to several different medical issues. One is I've had 2 heart operations to cure my atrial fibrillation. So I had the doctor that did my operation. I had prostate cancer 4 years ago. So I had my urologist on. And I am the voice of Zero Cancer this year. So that's a Bayer-backed organization. And third is my daughter has uveitis, which is the leading cause of blindness among young girls in America. It's a rare eye disease. That is, the foundation of that disease is rheumatoid arthritis-based school of diseases. And it's a disease in which the inner lens of your eye, the uvea, which is the middle lens, gets attacked because it thinks it's being attacked. And white blood cells, and the cells attach themselves to the lens. And if you don't remove those cells, they will cause blindness. And she was afflicted by this at the age of 8. She's 28 now, at the age of 6 rather. And it's uveitis, uveitis, uveitis. It's not UV rays, it's the uvea lens. complicated disease, and I've done a lot of fundraising for the organization, the Ocular Immunology Uveitis Foundation, or IUF. Try to say that 5 times fast. The Ocular Immunology Uveitis. And I fundraise for them. They're based in Boston, outside of Boston, because there's not enough money because it's an orphan's disease. You know what I mean? Like it's a small disease. It's not like everybody has it. Like people have colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer. This is a small thing. So you have to raise money every year for the foundation. And the hospital is the Mercy. It's called Mercy, Massachusetts Eye Research and Surgery Institute. It's an institute, and it deals primarily with inflammatory eye diseases. So you know what happens when you have a kid with a disease like this, Tommy? You become a pro at something that you never wanted to know about. I know a lot about uveitis. I deal with it. I know a lot about that. I also know a lot about prostate cancer, and I also know a lot about atrial fibrillation because I've been affected by it. So I try to pass on this knowledge to people, which is why they're on my podcast. If you have any interest in listening to people talk about atrial fibrillation, prostate cancer, or uveitis, go on to my podcast and learn about it.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you for all that you do for all the health issues in our world, especially, with your daughter. I love that story. I have a dear friend that's a GM. Her name is Luann. She manages the Bay Colony Community Association, which is kind of right in Naples. Her team is listening to you. They're huge fans. And I think they would love to know, of the 9,300 shows, besides the 9/11 show, which is probably one of the most memorable shows. And also all the people that were opening acts, or for you, or you were opening acts. I know you toured with the Stones and all the legends, but what was the best band that you love touring with? And maybe tell us a little about that.
Well, this is going to sound kind of self-serving and narcissistic, and I don't mean to sound that way, but the way we constructed our band back in the early days was, if you didn't blow a band off the stage, you weren't worth shit. And so the club owners, the agent said to me, you got to blow away all these little local bands. So we became really great at blowing bands off the stage, which meant we intimidated them and we didn't care. We never operated Twisted Sister as a lovey-dovey kumbaya band. We operated ourselves as a predatory rock band whose job it was to humiliate and blow away every band we ever played with, because that meant that we'd make more money. So we took that into the professional realm when we finally made it. So my job is to never care about the other bands I play with. Yes, we play with plenty of them. And yes, Judas Priest and Motorhead are very close. Lemmy passed away. Rob Halford from Priest is a good friend. I love those bands. I love playing with them. AC/DC is one of my favorite all-time bands. But when we go on stage, our job is to annihilate them and to try to just extricate every ounce of audience reaction. Because to be quite honest, it doesn't matter if these bands are better than us musically. We're so good live that we're going to make you think we're better than them. And that's our approach to how we function as a band. It has nothing to do with personal anything. I can love these guys behind the stage, but when guys go into battle on the football field, they don't care that the brother-in-law is playing on the other side of the field. They don't care. They got to win that game. I got to win my game every night. I have to be the best band at that festival. And I've played with every band you could possibly imagine. All I care about is the review says Twisted was the best band. So it doesn't matter. I walk once the bus gets to the arena, we walk out of that bus, the game face goes on, and it's get the hell out of my way. I am out to annihilate you tonight. And that's what we do. And you know what? Here's the other side of it. We welcome any band to blow us off the stage. I say, bring it on, bro. Knock us out. You know why? Because if you're that great, you're only going to make the audience happier. Because the audience, Tommy, is only there that one night. They don't have a million nights. If you have a bad night, you go, well, there's another show tomorrow. Not to that guy that just paid $100. Not to that family that just paid $300 with babysitters and cars and parking and all that crap. They're there that night. And they want the best that you can give. And if you can't give your best, you have no right to be there. I won't give you the list of the bands that suck. I won't tell you that because I don't want to start hearing my Twitter feed. But I can't tell you how many bands we play with that, like, I sit there on the side of the stage and I go, Jesus, man, these guys just suck. Like, how can they do that? Like, why would they? When you can go out there and be your best. So I say, bring your best shot and knock us off out there. So that's my feeling about my fellow musicians out there, because Twisted Sister was a predatory bar band, and that's how we did it. As far as the best show we ever played, this is something that may be very hard to understand, and I hope I can explain this correctly. It doesn't matter that we played, yes, the benefit was great, a great night. And we played to 110,000 people on many occasions and crowds over 100,000 people. That's not it. You would think, oh, isn't that great? 100,000 people are singing, we're not going to take it back to you. Yes, that is great, 100%. But if you ask me, what is the greatest show we ever played? It was an inconsequential performance in August of 1979 at a club called Speaks in Island Park, New York. We were the house band at Speaks. To put Speaks in perspective for you listeners out there, if you like the movie Goodfellas, Henry Hill worked at Speaks. And these were mob-owned bars. And this club was probably the most notorious of all of those mob-owned bars. We played with these people. We played in these bars all the time. And then we were the house band Speaks. And Speaks used to be called the Action House in the 60s. And the Action House had a legacy of any band that played the Fillmore East played the Action House. So Led Zeppelin, Rod Stewart, Jimi Hendrix, they all played the Action House. Now it was called Speaks. We're the house band Speaks, 1979. Every Thursday we played it. This particular weekend, we're playing Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. That Saturday night was the Dick Clark 25th anniversary of rock and roll. I brought a black and white TV to the dressing room because I wanted to watch for inspiration, his videos of the best groups in rock and roll. So he's counting down. Show ends at 11. We're supposed to be on at 10:45. The manager, Uncle Ralphie Greco, comes in and goes, "Hey, JJ, what's the fuck? What's up, man? You're supposed to be on stage." I said, "Ralph, I just want to get through this show. Give me 15 minutes. I want to watch the end of it." So he plays the greatest videos of all time. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on and on and on. And it ends with Springsteen doing Rosalita at the bottom line. And I'm watching this and I'm just like sucking it in. I'm going, yeah, okay, good. We walk out on stage to play the first show that night. And something happened. Some transition. Something happened. The place it exploded in a way that I can't explain to you, but there was blood on the walls. There was an outcry from the fans. It was like everything was on 10 plus, 10 plus, 10 plus. We just killed it. And I walked off stage thinking maybe it's just my interpretation. And my friend Scott, who's a good friend of the band, walks up to me and goes, "What the hell just happened?" He said to me, "What the hell just happened?" And I said, "You know what happened, Scott? I'll tell you what happened. What just happened on that stage for that hour validated every freaking decision I ever made, validated every sacrifice I ever made. If I go no further than that show, I can die because I succeeded in doing what I always believed I could do." Tommy, it was as religious and spiritual a feeling. And by the way, I can tell you that my bass player felt the same way. Dee didn't. I asked Dee about it. He didn't remember it that way. But for me, that night, that show validated every sacrifice I made to prove to me that I deserve to walk amongst the rock gods. Okay? So as self-absorbed and as narcissistic as that may sound, when you ask me, what was the one show, if I had to pick out of the 9,200 that meant the most to me, and there was only maybe 1,500 people in the room, that proved to me that I was deserving of assuming that I could somehow be looked on as a rock artist.
Thank you, John. Thank you, JJ. First of all, happy 70th birthday next year.
Not next year, 3 months, Tommy. You're getting your invitation if you come to New York, by the way.
And happy 50th anniversary for Twisted Sister. And I think what we're all just taking is just the power of innovation, how you've taken this rock band founded 50 years ago and made an incredible business out of the music. And I just love your story. And thank you so much for sharing your heart. The credit for today is Twisted for the folks online. And the next heart-led leader guest we have is Chip Conley, who is a great author. It's on May 4th. And he was really the person to take Airbnb to what it is today. And he's going to tell that story. JJ, love you, brother. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Beth Sargent, my partner in crime. And have a great month, Florida Club Mountain Association. Take care.
Thank you.